Dr. Travis Gratton with University Veterinary Care Centers joining us live for today's pet advice, and we are talking about diabetes in pets. Good morning, Dr. Gratton.
Good morning.
Which pets tend to be affected the most by diabetes?
Well, certainly the ones we see it most in is cats. Dogs are certainly a close second, but it can affect pretty much any species. It's not unique to any real group, but there certainly are even diabetic horses out there, so we don't treat those, but thankfully.
But they're out there.
But they're out there.
Well, what are some common signs of diabetes in a pet?
Diabetes, kind of the classic thing is the increased amount of urine production, and so with cats the litter box suddenly goes from little clumps to big clumps, and the litter is soaking wet. Weight loss tends to be a fairly consistent factor. A lot of times it's just they just don't really feel that good because their entire metabolic function is being disrupted by having no insulin and not being able to metabolize carbohydrates. And then certainly in dogs, rapid onset of cataracts, which is very, very common in them, but very rare in cats actually.
Is this something that can be cured in pets?
It is unfortunately at this point not curable. The battle goes on, research continues. Someday I think it probably is, and it's probably not that far off, but at this point it is lifelong management for them, although they can lead relatively normal lives if well managed. And so, like I say, at this point it's a lot of work and a lot of commitment to have one, but they can do very, very well.
And lifespan, is it if it's well managed, is it pretty much the same as a pet without diabetes?
Yeah, essentially it is. And kind of like with people, and unfortunately we all know somebody with diabetes who, as you start having other problems, the diabetes makes it much, much more complicated. The interplay when you lose balance of the diabetic control and the other disease processes start to interplay, it gets much, much more complicated. So that's probably the only real factor.
Well, talk about the treatment and what's available.
It is predominantly, almost all dogs and cats are insulin-dependent diabetics. They're not truly a type 1 diabetes like people, but they're close. But they do require regular diet schedules, specific diets at specific amounts and times, regular exercise, and then certain amounts of insulin at certain schedules as well. So it becomes a very regimented life, very much like diabetes in people.
Well, how is technology changing the way that it is managed?
Kind of on the three fronts there. We get both some newer insulins, which especially for cats can do amazing things, and some studies show up to 50% of cats over time can regress to a normal blood sugar regulation on their own. Some of them don't maintain that forever and have to go back on insulins, but some of these newer insulins, because they maintain longer levels, they don't have the ups and downs of blood sugar like we used to see with some of the older insulins, can work very well. Diets have really come around very well as well. Most of the manufacturers are coming out and continuing to push that with lower carbohydrate diets, higher fiber, things that make diabetes easier to regulate. And then the big thing really lately has been the monitoring. We're able to use some of the human monitors that would stick on as a patch on your arm with a tiny little hair-like needle in to monitor blood sugar continuously, as opposed to bringing the pet into the hospital and stressing the cat by being in a veterinary clinic for a day where we're checking blood sugars with a little needle stick, 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day. We can see what their blood sugars are doing over a week or two while they're laying around on the couch and sitting in the windowsill watching the birds.
Much less stressful for them.
And much more realistic as to what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
So.
Well, Dr. Gratton, thank you so much for being with us today. And if you'd like more information about University Veterinary Care Center, just head over to universityvetcare.com.